Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast, where today I am going to take you through some league-wide positional rankings. Is Jalen Brunson a top 10 point guard? Is Julius Randle a top 5 power forward? How low does RJ Barrett rank? We'll get into it all right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, and this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. And they have a special offer for all my listeners. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. And we want to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day. I had a friend of the show, shout out Nico Pinto, tell me personally he makes Locked On Knicks his first listen every single day. I hope you guys go join him. And if you want to be better about doing that, be sure to click the subscribe button. Be sure to click the notifications bell on YouTube so you never, ever miss an episode. And if you didn't catch it from there, we are available on all platforms, including on YouTube. But who's talking to you? I'm Gavin Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. Alex is going to have you covered tonight. So I decided to do a little solo episode today. And if you guys have followed the podcast over the years, you know, I like taking these solo opportunities to look out wide a little bit, to take in the perspective of the entire NBA. And I thought, what better way to do that than to stack up where the Knicks players rank around the league? Because I think it's good for two purposes. One, it kind of establishes what type of assets the Knicks have. If you're kind of looking on paper and you're like, all right, we can trade RJ Barrett for a superstar. And I guess I'd push back, like, can you, if he's only the X ranked, we'll get into the number in a sec, small forward in the league. And it gives you, I think it gives just a decent gauge of perspective heading into playoff time, because I'm sure, like me, you guys tend to overrate the guys who are on the Knicks relative to the rest of the league. And maybe it's very possible that I fell victim to that here, but I did my best to be unbiased. All right, and we're going to start off these rankings with the point guard spot. So if you're watching on YouTube, it is up on the screen. I had Steph Curry first. I don't know. On a night-to-night basis, there's a good argument that Luka is a better player than Steph at this point. I just think it's a situation where Luka has to kind of take the crown from the guy who is just the best player on a championship team with a good supporting cast, but certainly not the supporting cast he had earlier in his career, right? Like, Andrew Wiggins was the second best player on that team. You had an aging Draymond. Clay was incredibly inconsistent. Jordan Poole doesn't play a lick of defense, and yet they went in and beat the Boston Celtics in 6 games. So Luka second, Dame third, just having an incredible all-time season, most efficient season of his career, 31 points per game. I have SGA over Ja Morant. Maybe that's slightly controversial, but I don't know. I guess I kind of just appreciate that SGA just takes care of his business. Then James Harden, Drew Holiday, Tyrese Halliburton, and then Jalen Brunson, who just gets in over Darius Garland, De'Aaron Fox, and Kyrie Irving. The money symbol next to Kyrie Irving was not intentional. And then Trae Young, Fred VanVleet, Chris Paul, CJ McCollum, Marcus Smart, LaMelo Ball, Josh Giddey, Markelle Fultz, and coming in at number 21, Immanuel Quickley. All right, so for the rationale on Brunson's placement, Harden was an extremely tricky one to me, right? Puts up 21 points, puts up 11 assists, not scoring nearly as efficiently as he did at his apex, shooting less free throws, not shooting quite as many threes as he once did. But he just, I don't know. I can't get out of my head what he did to the Knicks when those two teams have played this year, where he's just ripped them apart at certain points. Drew is this high because he is just incredibly reliable. There's a decent case to put him ahead of Harden, but I've just never been blown away by Drew Holiday's offense, but he does have a propensity. I mean, even going back to the last Olympics, to just make incredible clutch time plays. And you listen to NBA guys on podcasts, and almost to a man, they will say Drew Holiday is the best man-to-man defender in basketball. Tyrese Halliburton, just right next to Harden for the best passing point guard in basketball this season. Hyper efficient, scoring a little bit less than he was earlier in the year, but he almost single-handedly drove the Pacers' success this season. And maybe if you swapped him and Jalen Indiana would still have similar success, and the Knicks wouldn't be much better than they currently are. But I just think what Halliburton's doing this year is a slightly more impressive feat, given that despite Miles Turner playing excellently of late, I just don't think Indiana has nearly the overall talent New York does. And for the first half of this season, we're playing about as well as them. And then Brunson over Garland. I mean, those two could essentially be a tie. Brunson is just is a slightly better scorer, is more efficient from 2-point range. So that was kind of the tiebreaker there for me. I do think Garland, if he wasn't playing with Donovan Mitchell, might have pretty similar stats to Jalen Brunson. And I do think Garland long-term is probably the better outside shooter, but I don't think he's ever going to have Brunson's just depth of interior scoring and interior game. Fox is having just a monster season for Sacramento. There's also a case for him being a couple spots higher. Kyrie, this is sort of a situation where, and one of my guiding principles, and this isn't just about Kyrie, this is kind of zoomed out, big picture, is that defense matters, but not that much until you get to the center spot. And I guess if I were to like just give a big picture example of why, like we all consider Trae Young a star pretty universally. No one really considers Matisse Thybulle a star, right? Like you can be an offensive first player and be arguably the worst defender in basketball and have an incredible impact on winning. The same cannot be said defensively unless you play the center position, which reminds me, I completely forgot to rank Rudy Gobert with the centers. But that's neither here nor there. Kyrie gets dinged for the off the court stuff because that is entirely destructive to a team, entirely destructive to a season. Because the Brooklyn Nets, like they could have looked at their season this year and said, wow, Kyrie was incredible. And he was averaging nearly 30 points per game, as efficient as anyone in the league. Probably like, I guess since we're putting Steph, Luka, and Dame on this list, like right there with those three and SGA for the most talented scoring point guard in basketball. But he nosedived Brooklyn's season, right? He nosedived Brooklyn's franchise at this point. So I know I'm kind of singing to an audience that's very happy to hear all that, but I feel like it needs to be justified because on a pure talent basis, like you put Jalen Brunson's brain in Kyrie Irving's body, Kyrie Irving probably should be fifth or so on this list. Like honestly, I would take him over John Morant if I had to win one game. I think Kyrie is that good. Trae Young, this is probably a little bit low for him. I don't think teammates love playing with the guy. And maybe that's an unfair accusation. Maybe you give them all truth serum. They say, no, he's great. He's an incredible leader. I've never seen it from Trae Young as a leader. And I think it is utterly destructive for the guy who takes all the shots and takes pull-up 35, 40 footers when his team is down by 15 to not be playing any defense. And I know the defense has gotten a little bit better this year, but I just can't justify putting him higher than someone like Brunson. And this is the same thing with Brunson and Kyrie, where Brunson is clearly so additive and so likable. Like we all saw the interaction between him and Julius Randle after that Hawks game. Jalen Brunson's teammates absolutely adore the guy. And honestly, that's part of me having Steph Curry at 1 over Luka too. And like, not that Luka is disliked, but Steph Curry is revered on the Warriors and revered in Golden State. And that it doesn't matter as much as the on the court stuff, but I think over the course of a long season, it's not something we'll ever be able to quantify, but it's something that makes an immense difference. All right. When we come back, I want to get into Immanuel Quickley's ranking. But before we do that, I need to remind you that this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. I know when I'm at my best, I really feel like I can do anything in the world and all my problems feel really insignificant. And I'm sure a lot of you listening have had that feeling too of like, oh my God, why did that bother me so much? It's just not a big deal. And then other times my problems can completely paralyze me. And I feel like it is the end of the world. If you've experienced anything similar, or if you've benefited from therapy in the past, it's time to try BetterHelp because they are as good and as convenient of a service as there is out there. I know for me personally, I've said on this podcast before, but therapy has dramatically changed my life, made me just much more functional as a person. And I think if nothing else, like even if you don't really have like definable mental health issues, it's incredibly good to have a third party to talk about your problems with. I know it's really helped me. So if you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, we're back. Continuing our point guard rankings. So I had Immanuel Quickley at 21st on this list, behind Chris Paul, who was 50. Well, okay, so we stopped at Trae Young. So Fred VanVleet 14th, Chris Paul 15th, CJ McCollum 16th. McCollum still a really good scorer, just not quite at the volume or the efficiency of the guys ahead of him. And then Chris Paul and VanVleet, and Marcus Smart, all three of them are really tricky to put in because statistically, particularly for Paul and Smart his whole career, but Paul just recently because he's gotten older, don't necessarily have the same impact of even someone like McCollum, but Smart is the best point guard defender in the NBA. I'm right there with DeJounte Murray, who I had as a shooting guard for the purposes of these rankings. And Paul is just a winner still and does a million little things every game to help a basketball team. LaMelo Ball, incredible talent, but his team is just horrible. They have to get a little bit better before I think about putting him higher. Josh Giddey, I don't know if he's better than Immanuel Quickley because I think Quickley is a dramatically better defender, but this is kind of a right now ranking. So maybe I should have Quickley ahead of Giddey, but man, I love Giddey. I love what he does as a rebounder. I love the size he brings to the table, and he's in another universe as a passer than Immanuel Quickley is. And Markelle Fultz over Quickley, that one I was kind of debating because Fultz has really elevated. We all saw the last time the Knicks played Orlando, just some of the dunks that he was pulling off, and is kind of showing why he was the number one pick in terms of his athletic ability, but still doesn't shoot threes on volume. And that is just such a killer. I think you'd be totally within your right to have Immanuel Quickley ahead of him. But that's where I came down. Immanuel Quickley at 21st. And if the 21st ranked point guard in the NBA is your backup, you are in a really fantastic position as a team. All right, shooting guard. Let's take a look. For the number one spot, I really went back and forth between all three of the top three guys. And you could go any way with it. But I went Devin Booker, Donovan Mitchell, Jalen Brown. I think I value Devin Booker's size over Donovan Mitchell, even though I think Mitchell is the better offensive player of the two of them. But Booker, you just have to worry a little bit less about him getting targeted come playoff time. Jalen Brown is easily the best defensive player out of that group, but he has never had to carry a basketball team the way Mitchell and Booker have. Mitchell got his team to the second round of the playoffs as the number one guy. Booker got his team to the finals as the co-number one guy, while Jalen Brown has always been number two. And he was incredible in the playoffs last year. So and particularly in the finals. So if you want to put Jalen Brown number one, I have no issue with it. I just don't think he is quite the creator that the other two are, and I don't think he's the passer that the other two are. 4, I have Paul George just over Anthony Edwards. That's one I went back and forth on. I think my reasoning would ultimately be that while Edwards has higher highs, George is more consistent, and Edwards has stretches of brilliant individual defense while also getting lost off the ball. George is still he maybe not quite at the peak of his early years of his career, but still just a very good overall defender. Then I had Brad Beal, Zach LaVine, kind of same mold, just score first, but very efficient guys. Jamal Murray, I think sans injury, he's probably top 5 on this list, but he's still kind of coming all the way back. Desmond Bane, love the guy, doesn't take anything off the table, just doesn't quite have the star quality of the guys ahead of him. DeJounte Murray, I really knock him for the lack of three-point shot. But he is just an incredible defender, incredible driver. Simons, the exact opposite of DeJounte. Tyrese Maxey, Klay Thompson, sometimes could be higher on this list. Probably for a playoff game, I might take him over Maxey, just not quite as reliable offensively as he once was. Again, past years would have had a case for top 6 or so on this list. And Tyler Hero, Devin Vassell, Jalen Green, Terry Rozier, Gary Trent Jr., Norman Powell, Buddy Hield, Kevin Huerter, and then our guy, Quentin Grimes. And I do think if Quentin was shooting 40% from three-point range instead of the 33% or so he's hovered over the last month and a half, 2 months, I think there'd be a case for having him like right in that 16 to 18 spot because he is just a dramatically better defender than most of the guys in this list. Like especially the two guys. I mean, he healed even more so than Herter. He's so much better defensively, but he has just not contributed on offense in quite the way I was hoping for and expected this year. All right, let's get into small forward. That's power forward real quick. All right, Kevin Durant, top spot, pretty easy. I know Jason Tatum's the grander MVP candidate of the two. I know Tatum outplayed him when they were in the first round series last year. I'm still rolling with KD. I personally think when he was healthy this year, he was the single best player in the NBA this season. Jason Tatum coming in at second, LeBron third, Kawhi, who has been figuring things out of late, kind of getting the benefit of the doubt, and fourth. Like if I'm looking at this from a season-long perspective, I would say that Jimmy Butler and maybe even Lowry Markkanen have been better players than him, but Kawhi at his best is the best player in the NBA. So I'm kind of splitting the difference and putting him fourth. DeMar DeRozan seventh, still super duper efficient, not much of a defender, is not driving winning in Chicago the way he was last season. Mikal Bridges at 8, just a brilliant two-way force, and honestly, like on the precipice of overpassing someone like DeRozan, but he's just not quite there as a night-to-night number one option the way DeRozan is yet. Kyle Kuzma, very, very similar to Bridges. You could flip-flop those guys either way. Franz Wagner, also in that mix, just kind of a notch below in terms of reliability compared to the few guys ahead of him. Chris Middleton was someone I really didn't know where to put on this list. Like based on resume, he should be higher. Based on how he's playing the season, should be lower. So similar to Jamal Murray, kind of just put him in the middle there. Kate Cunningham injured this whole year, but I'm still just a big believer in his talent. Love the passing, love the shot making. Bojan Bogdanovic, his Pistons teammate, incredible shooter. OG Anunoby. As I said in the trade discourse, I just think a little bit overrated. It's just one of those guys that year in and year out, I expect to be a different player offensively, and is always just a bit robotic. And it's always fascinating with those types of guys. Like, what would they do in like a different offense, a different system? Because those same things were said about Andrew Wiggins once upon a time, and then he got to Golden State, and he's not a brilliant passer, he's not a brilliant mover off the ball, but all that stuff improved to the point that he could function in another system. And there were rumors that Golden State was trying to get Anunoby at the deadline, and I wonder if he could have made the same acclimation or adjustment. But his defense has him deserving at 14. Michael Porter Jr. At 15, still like I maybe Kevin Durant, but outside of that, and Klay Thompson, but there are very few prettier jumpers in the NBA than Michael Porter Jr.'s, but all the injury concerns, still having the defensive issues, driving down this list a bit. 16, Keldon Johnson. 17, Jaden McDaniels. 19, Jalen Williams. 20, Trey Murphy. 21, RJ Barrett. Why do I have RJ so low? I will tell you after the break. But before I do, I have to tell you about Nissan's Most Electric Player of the Week, and it's brought to you by the all-new 2023 Nissan Ariya. So I'm looking for someone who brings a certain duality to the table, a combination of fierceness and elegance, beautiful but strong. And to me, Mitchell Robinson epitomizes those qualities. He's my Nissan Player of the Week because I believe he's going to come back and have an incredible game for the New York Knicks tonight. And he has this fluidity to his game. He always has, particularly defensively. I mean, the way he's able to contort his very large frame around the court. I would say it's borderline electric. It's brilliantly fierce. And just the way he elevates around the rim on both sides of the basketball. But yet he's added real bulk and he's become a powerful player. I'd go so far to say a stunningly or elegantly powerful player around the bucket. The 2023 Nissan Ariya packs pin-to-your seat power and premium intelligence all in one EV. The all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya, the EV for people who love to drive. You can shop now at nissanusa.com. All right. I ended the last segment on a little bit of controversy. Why do I have RJ Barrett? Oh my God. I'm going to get some hateful comments for this one. Why do I have RJ Barrett below the likes of Harrison Barnes, Jaden McDaniels, Jalen Williams, Trey Murphy, right? Because I don't think maybe some people will poke at Keldon Johnson. Guess what? He's on a way worse team with way worse threats around him, Keldon Johnson, and he's still scoring more than RJ and doing so more efficiently. And when I was looking at this for all these guys, I was like, all right, if they got to take as many shots as RJ, would they shoot better than him? And the answer I kept coming back to is yes. Like Jalen Williams, I know he's a rookie. He's a 50% shooter this season overall. 50%. RJ's 43% this year. And he plays better defense, and he's a more unselfish player. Jaden McDaniels is just an awesome lockdown defender for Minnesota. So I thought he deserved to be in the mix for that reason. And then Trey Murphy, very similar. Outstanding elite shooter, great defender, not nearly the creator that RJ is, not asked to do the same things that RJ is. But I kind of think the Knicks would be better with someone like that. I don't think just shooting a lot inherently makes you a star. And I think RJ right now, like what he is in the NBA, is a volume scorer. And there are points where that's not true. And we've discussed it on the pod before where there are certain things he does exceptionally well. But if he's not going to play defense, he's not going to take good shots, he's not going to make a lot of the shots he takes, it's hard to justify him having him higher than that, despite the pressure that he puts on the rim, because we can talk about his good qualities until the Crows come home. But the Knicks are still far better when he is off the court than when he is on the court. All right, let's move on to power forward. A shorter list here. Giannis is number one. Easy. Pascal Siakam at number two. The guy's putting up 25 points, 8 boards, 6 assists a game. I think the playmaking is what really surprised me with Siakam, that like we always think of Randle as a really good passer. And maybe I'm just way behind on this, but I never really put Siakam in that category. But the guy is just an absolute elite playmaker, pretty efficient scorer, and doesn't have Randle's bulk defensively, but compensates with super duper long arms. But Randle, just one spot in back of him at number 3. I had him just ahead, and like I think there's a case to be made for the 3 guys behind him to be ahead of Julius. Zion would be if he was healthy all the time. He's just not healthy all the time, and also still doesn't play defense and still doesn't shoot. It doesn't matter because he is a once in a generation freak of nature. But those are all advantages that Randle has on him. Draymond Green, like if I were trying to win one playoff game, I'd maybe take Draymond Green over Randle right now, just because he is so incredibly impactful as a defender, has been through the wars, knows what to do, makes the right decision on both sides of the ball essentially every time. But it's just such a zero for the most part offensively at this point, outside of some creative passing, that I cannot justify putting him ahead of a guy averaging 25 and 10. And Kristaps Porzingis is having a great season, just not healthy enough for me, like in and out of the lineup while Julius plays every single game this year. So got to have Julius Randle ahead of him. And then as far as the other guys on this list, real quick, it's Jeremy Grant, Paolo Banchero, Aaron Gordon, who's having a great season in Denver, and Evan Mobley. All right, final one, center, Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, flip-flop them any way you want. Both all-time talents, both surefire Hall of Famers. Anthony Davis at 3. This is kind of for the peak more than the median with AD. Had that stretch of MVP level play this year. If I was just like drafting guys for a playoff roster, like I'm just taking Anthony Davis's upside over Bam, over Jaren Jackson Jr., who's having an incredible two-way season when he's not fouling out. And then Domantas Sabonis playing more center than power forward for the Kings this year. Elite playmaker, but just not the two-way force the guys above him are. Brook Lopez, great defender, still can score on some rollicking drives and isolations. And I really, really value that he can shoot the 3-ball the way he does. Jared Allen just behind him. I think maybe a lot of people would have him ahead of Brook. I have Brook ahead just because of the spacing component that he brings. Nick Claxton, Jared Allen's replacement in Brooklyn. I think deserving to be just ahead of Mitchell Robinson on this list because of the type of defender he is and the fact that he has the flexibility in terms of guarding on the perimeter that Mitch had early in his career, but maybe has lost just a tad as he's traded a little bit of lateral quickness, a little bit of explosiveness for increased bulk. And then this was tough putting Clint Capella one spot over Mitchell Robinson, because Capella was the guy when Mitch was a rookie. If you're a longtime listener to this podcast, he was our go-to comparison always for Mitchell Robinson. And the case for Mitch is what he does on the defensive end of the floor. But Capella is leading sneakily, like a lineup with Trae Young in it. The Hawks starting lineup is, I believe, still to this day, like out of lineups playing significant minutes, the best defensive 5-man group in the entire NBA. And Capella deserves a lot of credit for that. And offensively, just still, like, part of it is that he gets to play with Trae Young, who is just a notch above Jalen Brunson as a creator and as a lob passer, and in terms of the attention that he draws. So Capella gets some easy shots, but Capella is just a slightly more versatile offensive weapon than Mitch, while still bringing that rebounding. But for everything that Mitch takes away in terms of the fact that you just have to station him around the rim, he's just such a dominant force this year on the glass, and such a impactful defender. I mean, the Knicks are something like the 5th best defense in the league when he's on the court, something like the 27th best defense in the league when he's off the court. I think that puts them rightfully at 11th over someone like Nikola Vucevic, who is an infinitely better offensive player than Mitch. But as I said earlier, I don't think defense should be a significant factor in these rankings until you, or at least like a decisive one in these rankings, until you get to the center position. But at the center position, I think that shapes the structure of your entire team, which is why I have Mitch ahead of Vucevic, why I have him ahead of Jakob Poeltl, who's a solid defender and a better offensive player than Mitchell Robinson, but not by enough of a margin to make up for the defensive gap. Ivica Zubac, that might be some East Coast bias. Like, he's outstanding and plays with a whole lot of force around the bucket. I'm really impressed with his improvement. Same thing with Kevon Looney, who's kind of an unsung hero in Golden State's last few great teams. But that'll do it, guys. Thank you so much for tuning into this edition of the Locked On Knicks podcast. Alex will have you covered with the recap of the Wizards game tonight. But until then, be good. We'll talk to you soon on Locked On Knicks.